Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie and in today's video we're going to be building a habitat for the American alligator. So in one of the previous videos in the Floki Wildlife Park series, we built an enclosure for the Californian sea lion. And just up the river from there, we're going to be building for the American alligator. This habitat's going to be a little bit smaller. It's going to be mainly focusing on the welfare of the animal rather than the guest experience so much. The viewing galleries are going to be placed above it in two separate areas, so you're not going to be able to get right up close to these animals. It's going to be a case of seeing them from a distance, which is completely fine because, as I said, we want to be focusing more on the welfare of these animals, prioritising their kind of living conditions and their privacy and whatnot. So that's the idea for this habitat. To begin with, all we're going to do is use the chain link fence and mark out where we want this habitat to be. We're going to be crossing relatively close to the staff footbridge that we placed when we did the Californian sea lion habitat, and we're just going to go all the way up to the waterfall at the other end of this river and back down again. It's quite a narrow habitat, but that is because we need to prioritise the water space for these animals. On the opposite bank, we're going to leave a little bit of space where we're going to have a shelter for these animals, but nearer the staff facilities, we're also going to have a bank that the staff can obviously get onto and fill up our food kind of items like our feeding trays and any food-based enrichment items like the blood pumpkin. When it comes to creating a habitat house for these animals, I wanted a sort of fishing hut vibe, so we're going to be using the plank-based building materials like we did for the Californian sea lion habitat house. And we're going to build a fairly simple structure that rises up on the left-hand side, has a lower kind of area on the right-hand side, but we're also going to build a pier that will stretch out into the water, and then it just gives a bit of an extra kind of dimension to this habitat house and separates it a bit from what we previously built. With this building, I want to go a little bit heavier on the decoration side of things, so I'm going to be using a few different sized beams and planks to line corners and around window and door frames, just to help separate them from the rest of the building, because otherwise it can look a bit too flat, a bit too samey. Adding these planks and beams will really help to introduce not only a new colour, but a bit of an extra dimension to these areas as well. I also spend quite a bit of time experimenting with using some canopy sort of decorations over the windows and stuff, just to add a little bit to those and have them be less than just, I guess, a hole in the building, but make them look more like a functioning window where you can kind of imagine somebody leaning out of. Even though that's not going to happen in this case, because unless I'm mistaken, alligators don't know how to open windows, so, you know, it's not really an issue. Ultimately, I end up using the Planet Zoo shop canopies over the top of the windows, as I quite like their sort of zebra-like pattern. I know it's not quite zebra, but it gives off that vibe, I guess. And I try to align the colours to be a bit more in line with our donation bins that we've got going around the park. We're starting to create a bit of a colour theme, colour scheme even, and I'm considering having each part of the zoo have a different colour scheme. So far for this temperate zone, all the donation bins have had a couple shades of green, and now these canopies are having the same. So I'm thinking the colour scheme for the temperate zone will be a green, like a mix of greens, and then when we get over to Africa it can be yellows and stuff. For the roof I'm going to be using the Hay African roof again, just because I think it works fairly well with this type of building. It doesn't work the best. I'm sure there are better options, we just haven't exactly got them yet. I'm really looking forward to getting some more DLCs and more building materials so that I can blend these kind of things together a bit better, because I honestly don't think that there's a roof that goes like 100% with this type of planky wall piece. So yeah, I also decided to add the alligator decoration, the nice cartoony alligator, and call this area Allie's Creek, I think is what I called it. I ended up having to change it because originally I was writing Crocs Creek because alliteration, great. And then I remembered it's not crocodiles going in here, it's alligators. So I'm going to need to change that. So yeah, I changed it to Ali's Creek. But as for the actual creation of this sign, it's just a matter of going through the art piece decorations on the letter kind of tab and then sinking them into the wall a little bit, because I didn't want them to be popping out like as much as they originally were. I also added some rope. I think this kind of really helped to hint at this place being kind of a fishing hut, having rope just dangling from the wall because it's being stored there for their lines and stuff. I don't know, it just added a little bit extra. And then I strolled upon the kind of weathering decals, the various bits of damage and stuff that you can apply to walls and whatnot. And oh my goodness, does it make it look so much better. You can really gunge up these walls and have it look like it is kind of in a swampy environment, which is what I end up going for with this particular habitat, because all of a sudden I can add a lot more realism to this building by having these bits of damage and algae or moss, but it is moss, but you know, I was thinking algae kind of because of the water. So I plastered that over the front of this habitat house and then all over the decking as well that forms our little pier sort of area. Proper gunge it up and get it looking nice and dirty. And after placing tons of this muck and gunge all over the decking, I decided to move on to a few more decorations just to really tie this area together. And the first thing I'm going to do is use some fencing pieces to outline the deck, because obviously if you have people working on here, if it wasn't actually just for alligators, you would have people up here and you don't really want them to be falling into the water all the time. So I take the East Asian fence, as I really like the wooden aesthetic of it, and I just copy and paste it around the perimeter of this decking, and I make sure to alter the colours to be something that I think fits quite nicely. And then after that I'm going to add various decorations such as discarded bags that kind of look like they're full of flour, like sacks I guess, wooden ladder, wheelbarrow, kind of just workman stuff that has been discarded on this platform. And then when we are happy with the decorations, all I need to do is place some wooden columns or beams underneath the pier area as supports, because at the moment it is just levitating and that makes absolutely no sense. We need there to be something underneath to be supporting this structure, otherwise it would just collapse into the stream. I would just like to point out that if you yourself are trying to make a habitat house that looks like it once did belong to humans and has since been abandoned and has been kind of taken over by these animals, then adding these very human decorations such as the wheelbarrow or the bucket or the stepladder, adding those kind of things really helps to sell that idea that humans did actually work here at some point. It hasn't always belonged to these animals. And with the completion of the habitat house, there really isn't that much left to do for this habitat really. I just need to add all of the enrichment items and make sure they're accessible. So any toys and stuff are going to be going over here on the habitat house area on the pier, and then any of the things that the keepers need to be able to access, such as the food trays or any food enrichment items, they are going to be going over on the bit of land near the habitat gate, because these need to be accessible by the zookeepers. It's worth noting that even if a zookeeper can't access the entire habitat, they can actually clean it as long as they can access a small portion of it. That's how you're able to build islands and stuff like this where the keeper can't necessarily get to that side of the habitat. He can still clean it despite not getting there. This is a very, very useful thing to know when you're planning out your habitats and want it to be a little bit more interesting and less flat. And it was at this stage, once I was waiting for the animals to actually arrive in the habitat, that I realised that I'd written crocs instead of alligators. So I got rid of crocs and replaced it with alleys, so it becomes Ali's Creek. Kind of makes it sound like one of the alligators is named Ali. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to actually start renaming some of these animals, because I'm completely open to that. We can have this be much more of a community zoo. If people want to get involved, leave comments in the comment section below to give me suggestions and stuff, whether that be names or new species for the zoo. When the animals first arrive, I can start to do the terrain distribution alterations and make sure that they have all the necessary ground textures that they need in order to be happy in their enclosure. And I also check the heat maps to understand where they can access within this habitat, because the entrance to the habitat house is kind of narrow and I wasn't entirely sure if they'd be able to reach it. And the female can reach it fairly easily. However, the male is much larger, And when he arrives, I have to make quite a few alterations to the bank of land near the habitat house. I'm going to put loads of rocks in place and stuff, and just widen that area to make sure the animal can actually access it, because when he first comes to the habitat it's a bit difficult. So there's a lot of back and forth with altering terrain to make sure that it's traversable for both types of animal in this habitat. And when I say types, I mean the gender morphs. There is a bit of sexual dimorphism in these animals, in the fact that the males are much larger. It looks like he's about twice the size of the female, which is absolutely crazy. So his hitbox, in terms of where he can travel and stuff, is much larger, so we need to alter the terrain accordingly. When it came to placing plants in this habitat, I wasn't going to mess about too much. I thought I would concentrate some trees around the edges, have quite a few rocky outcrops, and make sure that it was mostly green. We're not going to be dealing with too many flowers in this habitat. I wanted the plant life in here to be a little bit more muted, and just have it be quite, not so much dull, but not really vibrant. I don't know, it just felt a bit more fitting to have the plant life be a little bit more muted and not so in your face and vibrant. We just want lots of different shades of green, have it be quite rich, but you know, not too powerful, I guess. Yeah, there was plenty of rocks, and I even did some fallen trees near the edge of the habitat where it leads into the dam, where our zookeepers are using the keeper path. Over there we're going to have some fallen trees and stuff. Yeah, I'm going to stop talking now because I'm rambling. Just going to let you sit back and watch the time-lapse of this area being built up, and then we will be back for the grand reveal. Thank you so much for having watched this video. If you liked it, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel to see more. For those of you that did see him, I hope you enjoyed seeing Floki pop up to give us a little fact about this animal. He'll be doing that for the future of this series. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.
Oh,